and welcome. My name is Jennifer McLean. I'm a Senior Product Manager in IEEE Educational Activities, and I'll be the moderator for today's IEEE Tech Talk event. IEEE is the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. Before we begin, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Huawei. Please note a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are engagement tools that are resizable and movable, so you can move them around to make the most of your dashboard space. If you have any questions for today's panelists, you can submit them through the Q&A widget on your screen, or click on the purple Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer as many questions as time allows. If you click on the green resources icon, also at the bottom of your screen, you'll find more information about IEEE, IEEE 802 standards, today's event, and future virtual events. Finally, the on-demand link for today's event will be emailed to all registrants approximately 2 hours after we finish today. And if you'd like to tweet about this event, please use the hashtag IEEELearn. Our virtual event today is IEEE 802 Networking Standards Connecting the World. The technical standards created by the IEEE 802 Local Area Networking Metropolitan Area Network Standards Committee, or LMSC, over the past 40 years have been successful and essential in enabling suppliers of data communications components, products, systems, and services to be delivered economically and at an immense scale. This vast, ubiquitous, mostly hidden data communications infrastructure of the Internet relies on technologies and protocols that have been specified and continually updated by a dedicated group of engineers in IEEE 802 LMSC. And this infrastructure has proven to be robust, as demonstrated by the increased stress on systems due to the massive increase in virtual gatherings caused by COVID-19 pandemic. Our panelists today are my friends, Paul Nikolich and John D'Ambrosio. Paul Nikolich is chair of IEEE 802 Land-Man Standards Committee, overseeing 75 active technical standards and the 50 concurrent projects for wired and wireless networking applications. John D'Ambrosio is a distinguished engineer at FutureWay, a U.S. subsidiary of Huawei. He is a member of the IEEE 802 Executive Committee and is chairing 2 Ethernet projects. And so at this time, Paul, can you get us started by talking about the 40th anniversary of 802 this year? Paul, yeah, your microphone is on mute, I think. It's not working.
Well, while Paul's trying to do this, I can actually present this slide on his behalf.
Good.
Everybody, Paul and I will be speaking today, but we should point out that everything that you hear today is our own personal opinions. You see the standard boilerplate language on the slide at this time. We are not here on behalf of IEEE. We are speaking as individuals, and the opinions that you hear are our own, mine and Paul's. Paul, are you back?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Sorry about that, everyone. Let me start again. Welcome, everyone, to the Tech Talk. I very much appreciate everyone that's tuning in to hear John and I talk about something we know extremely well and dedicated substantial portions of our careers to. As John did the preamble already regarding these, what we talk about are our opinions and not the IEEE's. What we want to talk about today is a little bit about the history of 802 and the celebration of the 40th anniversary. In 1980, a few dozen people got together from a handful of companies to write a technical standard to enable the interoperable interconnection of computers and peripherals. Back then, there were several different local area networking technologies, and the industry realized that it would be beneficial for it overall if there was a single protocol that could be used by multiple vendors. And IEEE 802 was launched. In the ensuing 40 years, IEEE 802 has grown to over 700 participants. As Jennifer mentioned, we have 75 different active standards. We've got about 50 active projects covering the gamut from wireless to wireline, various media types. And we're going to be covering at a very high level some of the technologies that we've developed technical standards for and the applications that they've enabled. It's been an incredibly successful and rewarding activity. Most people don't understand the complex and hidden infrastructure behind what makes connectivity possible. And especially today, with the COVID pandemic, it's become increasingly necessary for people to be connected remotely. And the network has been performing in an incredibly robust way, partially due to the fact that the standards that have been developed by the IEEE 802 LAN-MAN community have been implemented in such a high quality and a robust manner. And we're going to cover several of those technologies and applications today. Just checking, John, can you still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'll be talking about the wireless standards that we've developed, and John's going to be talking about the wireline standards or the applications that run on top of them. But back in 1990, when we first started our first wireless activity, that was the wireless LANs, it was limited to a relatively small portion of the spectrum, 2.4 gigahertz, and the data rates were about 2 megabits per second. Since then, we've got operations in sub-gigahertz, 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, 60 gigahertz, and the operations are all the way up into the multi-gigabit per second capacity, as well as long-range and low-power wireless. So that's the range of wireless activities. John, why don't you take us through the wireline activities?
Well, before we leave the wireless, particularly Wi-Fi, let's start there, because I think most people are actually really familiar with Wi-Fi, right? They get on their phone, they get on their computer, and they do their wireless connection. And that's really how most of us get on the internet today. The reality, though, is that the wireline, all of the wired connections in between there are a vast influence on the interconnectivity and the applications that we enjoy today. Think about it. You connect via Wi-Fi. From that Wi-Fi connection is a wireless access point. From there, Ethernet is providing a total solution from DC to 400 gig. That's right, DC, we provide power, and we have solutions that range from 10 megabit all the way up to 400 gigabit. They're used in a myriad of ways, from providing the connectivity of our enterprise-type networks and networks in our houses to the interconnectivity in these hyperscale data centers that we use in everyday life. From the social media, the purchasing, the online purchasing we do, Facebooking, the cats and dogs videos, all this stuff is driven by our data centers where there's a lot of Ethernet underway. So it's in our lives already, and it's expanding. We're finding Ethernet moving into automobiles, the factories of the future, into smart cities, and into higher speeds yet. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but Ethernet is providing that total wired connectivity from traces connecting chips to connecting boards and systems, to connecting boxes, to connecting buildings. Ethernet provides that wired connectivity. So I think that's a great intro exactly to all of the different Ethernet specs that are being developed inside of the 802 standards group. So Paul, let's move on from there and talk about where we are today with the network of today, essentially.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, John, for that overview. So as you can see, the work that we do in 802 in developing technical specifications for a wide variety of applications, and the slide that we're showing right now is a very good description of how the COVID-19 pandemic has driven increased levels of capacity needs through a wide range of applications. As John mentioned, we've got work from home, virtual experiences, security, telemedicine, electronic payments, shopping, streaming from home, playing from home, socializing, and learning from home. All of those have grown at an incredible rate, from 50% to 2,000%. Just the fact that we're doing this today live from our homes is an example of how well the underlying infrastructure is performing. And 802, the technical specs that we've developed in 802, are partly responsible for that robustness, because we spend an incredible amount of time and care in developing the technical specifications. The way the technical specs are developed is, people bring in ideas for new capabilities, and it's shared amongst a group of individuals, experts globally, and we strive hard to reach consensus across hundreds of people, and in the process of review, develop these high-quality technical specs that multiple vendors can pick up, create chips, equipment, and services, connect them together, and you've got this wonderful connectivity infrastructure that exists today. John, do you want to talk about the demand?
Well, actually, yeah, I do. And I want to step back for a second. We do know that demand is going up. That's a normal part of life. We talk about up and to the right in terms of bandwidth growth. But, looking at the slide on the screen at this time, this is not a slide that talks about normal growth. This is a slide that talks about the growth in various applications really in a period of months, 2 months. So consider that. I mean, I actually saw on one of the internet exchanges that traffic jumped a terabit in one day. So think about that. So the amount of consumption of bandwidth through all of these various applications is normally growing, right? The application usage, when you're providing a positive user experience delivered really not just by the applications itself, but by what's enabled by the bandwidth, have really been delivering normal growth. But this is not normal growth that we're looking at right now. You can think of COVID as the ultimate stress test on an environment. We talk about, Paul talked about the high quality standards. To test them in this sort of environment, no one would ever, we would never do what we've done over the past few months, I'm sure, but we have, and the network survived. Now, there have been signs of stress. Yes, networks are growing. Some equipment is being added in certain places, but the download times themselves are starting to increase. And that's an indication that there is some congestion. And, we expect there to, normally be some congestion that happens, but we're now showing the signs of that in a very stressful manner that, well, it sounds really stupid. We're showing the stress in a stressful manner, but I think that's a great way to try to capture what we've been experiencing. Okay, so as Paul alluded to, we do get together and our various meetings, but each of the different groups in 802 have their own next-gen style committee or activity, if you will, where they're looking at these sort of things and thinking, when do we need to start considering adding new speeds? When do we need to start considering new reaches, new applications? And that's an ongoing activity because, we actually do look at, not today, but we're looking out at things will be out and being deployed in several years. Some of the stuff that we talk about really goes into almost 7 years, 7, 8 years when you really expect it to hit the market. So we have these sorts of activities that are underway all the time. I'm going to show you a slide now. This is from a recent activity that I was involved with called the Ethernet Bandwidth Assessment. It's the second one that 802.3 has done over the past 10 years. And you can get this report at the URL that's in the link there, and I think we provide this at the end. But it provided an industry analysis over the past 18 months, pre-COVID, that was looking into how bandwidth is growing in various applications. Now, in the graph that I'm showing you right now, what you see is a series of different applications looking at the growth based on data that we got, as well as having to provide some forecasting going out to 2025. Now, we normalize that data back to 2017, which was when the last speed of Ethernet is, because really what we were interested in was knowing what does this mean to Ethernet in terms of growth? And what we saw was that based on the different applications that we have, there's a multitude of different applications out there. In this case, this is a small subset. The growth is anywhere from 2x to 55 times the amount of traffic in 2017. Okay, so now if we look at what's happening with Ethernet, our top speed right now is 400 gig, and we finished that standard in 2017. If we were to start a new standard today, it would come in roughly around 2025. It might be 800 gig, it might be 1.6 terabit. This is only a 2x to 4x increase in the amount of traffic that bandwidth that Ethernet will be able to support. So we really need to start working and get started on that. Now, it's not just from an Ethernet perspective, though this is what this slide talks about. We have the same sorts of activities going on in our wireless groups as well, where they're looking at next gen. And Wi-Fi Gen 5 is coming out, and Gen 6 is underway as well in terms of getting started. So it's a never-ending battle, Paul, in terms of what's the next speed? What's the next speed? We're constantly building on that.
Yeah, John, excellent points. What I'd like to emphasize is that what we do in 802 is we must develop these detailed technical specifications that take years to complete, well before the actual demand for a particular feature or capability is needed in the marketplace. And we've done a remarkable job of that. The work that we're doing in 802 today will probably get deployed 3 to 4 to 5 years from now. And we've been very successful in anticipating what the requirements and the needs are, and developing standards that will also support unknown applications. Like when we started on the wireless activities back in 1990, initially it was simply to support remote cash registers in stores. And no one ever anticipated that it would be used the way it is used today, as John said, ubiquitously for connectivity to the wired infrastructure. The other aspect of the work that we do inside of 802 is that it's done by the individuals that work for the suppliers of components and systems and services. The hundreds of people that are working on the standards come together several times a year, face-to-face usually. Now we're virtually connecting to develop these technical standards in order to meet those emerging requirements. And as John pointed out, no one anticipated the level of stress that's being placed on networks that the COVID-19 pandemic has placed, but it is a good indicator of how well this group has done its job over the past 5 years. Looking back 5 years, we were working on the technical standards that are currently implemented in the networks today. So with that, maybe, John, you can talk a little bit more about the next generation activities and how we encourage and facilitate the discussion of what's coming, what's next, what projects should we consider starting.
Right. That's a great point. Before we jump into what's next in terms of next projects, probably it'd be good to talk about where we are right now in terms of the various different projects. As I said, Ethernet right now is providing solutions everywhere from DC all the way up to 400 gig. If you were to look at the different projects that are out there right now, you would find a multitude of applications. You would have access solutions, you would have solutions targeting automotive. I mean, some people don't realize this, but they're talking about doing greater than 25 gigabit for the high definition cameras that are going to be put in cars. So we're looking at copper and optical solutions for this. We're also looking at a bunch of higher speed issues. Right now, we're really coming to the fruition of 100 gigabit per second signaling across the entire Ethernet family, with solutions being provided today more in a fashion of a 4x25 stream. Now we'll have a single serial stream. Think about that, 100 gigabit per second running over a differential trace in a board, running over optical fibers, being ganged together to provide 400 gig. We're really looking at something that, we started 15 years ago. It's 2020. 100 gig really launched in December of 2005. So 15 years of development effort and migration from one speed to the next speed to provide a better Ethernet solution each time. In addition, we're also looking at providing Ethernet over DWDM systems now. So we'll be looking at doing interconnectivity across the board. And as I alluded to with the bandwidth assessment, we are beginning to recognize we're going to need higher speeds, right? So something beyond 400 gig. And I probably want to jump back down to the lower speeds, because there's also industrial applications. There's something called single pair Ethernet, where we're now looking at doing 10 megabit per second. Speed is relative, and I think sometimes people lose sight of that. Some people are always interested in the shiny new speed, right? It's the sexy new thing to talk about. But when you look at Ethernet, we provide a multitude of solutions for different applications, and each of those applications have their own needs and speeds. So it's a very diverse, wired community that we live in and that we support. Paul, I know the wireless as well has its own uniqueness. Maybe you ought to touch on that.
Yeah, as I indicated earlier, the trajectory on the wireless side has been very interesting. It's mostly driven by the availability of unlicensed spectrum. And what we've seen in the world today is that we need more unlicensed spectrum, and the regulators are beginning to provide that. Recently, the FCC here in the United States is looking at expanding the amount of spectrum for use, unlicensed operation, up to 7 gigahertz, allowing more connections and higher bandwidth connections. And we're developing standards that are going to take advantage of that increased spectrum availability. There are also increases in spectrum that's being made available up at the higher frequencies, unlicensed spectrum at 60 gigahertz for multi-tens of gigabit per second interfaces, and as well as the lower frequencies for long-range, low-power applications. Some of the interesting new areas that we're beginning to develop, as John pointed out, is for the industrial applications area, the automotive area, areas that we didn't anticipate 10 years ago, but nevertheless we are developing the capabilities, and we've got a group that's specifically focused on creating protocols that are allowing time-sensitive traffic to be accurately delivered for these new applications. If you can imagine in an automotive application, if you're using Ethernet to control your braking system, you got to make sure that when a packet is sent out to control the braking system, it gets there on time and it does the job that it's supposed to do. And we're doing all of this work inside of 802 now. And interestingly enough, we're also doing work in the wireless domain that's not communications oriented. We're going to be starting a project in the next few months that is using the RF energy from the 802.11 wireless LANs that exists in the space that the LANs are operating to detect position and location. And the applications that will enable are a whole brand new set of applications. You know, one of them might be for healthcare or for monitoring the well-being of older people. You can track their movement inside of a home. You can detect whether or not they've fallen down. So one of the things that I'm extremely proud of is that 802 is entrepreneurial and welcoming of new ideas. If you have a new idea, come to 802. If it does have merit, you'll get several people that will want to participate with you in creating a technical specification that will enable this new equipment and market to be deployed widely. And that's about it. What I'd like to do is encourage everyone to look at some of these resources that we have for IEEE 802, which describes what we're doing. And I'd like to encourage people to get involved in 802. As I said at the top, 802 is comprised of individuals. Yes, the vast majority of individuals are affiliated with companies that sponsor their involvement, and it is a very time-intensive and long-term involvement, but we're open. You know, if you're interested in participating, all you need to do is show up to a meeting and engage. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. Jennifer, do you have any questions for us?
Yes, Paul and John, we have a few questions, and we are at the 9:30 mark of our time. And for those who wish to stay on for a few more minutes of Q&A, we would welcome you to stay with us. Are there 802 projects that are country or region specific?
John, why don't you get on that?
Yeah, that's really a great question. I mean, I look at the like this Ethernet bandwidth assessment. That is data really captured from around the world. So to answer your question simply, yes, there are projects that target different applications, because one of the things that we have observed in 802 and really during the course of this bandwidth assessment is the huge diversity in applications and needs that occur on a regional basis. If you really want to get a good handle of that, I would suggest that you look at the bandwidth assessment, and you'll see different data throughout that report that is cited on a regional basis all around the world. And we have seen in some cases some parts of the world accelerating. And in terms of, for example, cellular mobile data, we saw huge differences and swings that really were used to help justify some of the projects, because there are, you know, like from a reach perspective, there are different demographics around the world, and that has an influence on the standards. And we do have participation from all around the world. It's amazing to me to watch that. So yes, it is. IEEE is global in that sense.
Thank you, John. We have another question. Are there any wireless communication standards getting developed for ultra low power IoT devices that are battery powered?
The answer to that is yes. We have a project that's coming to an end inside of 802.11 wireless LAN called Wake Up Radio. And what that is specifically targeted at low power sensors that should be able to operate for 10 years on a coin cell battery. If you use 802.11 as it's currently specified, it'll be fairly power inefficient, and Wake Up Radio increases the efficiency by more than a factor of 10. I'm not sure exactly, but yeah, we have specifically addressed that in 802.11.
Thank you, Paul. We have another question. How does IEEE 802 affect 5G communications technology?
Well, I think there's two ways to answer that. Paul, I'll let you deal with the wireless, and then I'll touch on the wired.
Go ahead. Okay, so on the wireless side, as John indicated, Wi-Fi, which is based on 802.11 wireless LAN, is by far the dominant technology by which people connect to the infrastructure. And the cellular infrastructure is accommodating that fact by enabling seamless migration from your Wi-Fi environment into a cellular environment without losing the connection. So that's the means by which we're interacting with the cellular mobile networks, with the 5G, the emerging 5G networks. We're also, as I indicated earlier, developing standards for operation at the higher frequencies for higher capacity connections, the multi-tens of gigabits connections for fixed wireless access, which is part of the 5G. And we're also incorporating this time-sensitive networking capability into 802 networks. I know what John's going to talk about is the underlying infrastructure below what you see, in towers. What is that infrastructure made of, John?
Look, I'm not one of those type of people that touts wireless versus wired. I don't believe in it. The reality is they go together. They're symbiotic. And as demand grows for 5G, that symbiotic relationship really comes into play. So when we talk about 5G, how is 802 impacting the 5G? I think it's that underlying support for that infrastructure, being able to deliver all of that data that is going to be needed. That's all going to happen over wires of one sort or another. Front haul, back haul, going back to the data centers themselves. That entire path is not wireless. It's wireless and wired. And 802.3 Ethernet solutions are used throughout that entire network, as I've touched on already. So I think it's really a symbiotic bandwidth relationship. In addition, we're looking at other things. You have time synchronous networking that we're dealing with. That's one aspect. You have latency issues that we have to deal with. That's another aspect. There is, it's not point to point. The time sensitive protocol project that we're doing right now in 802.3, trying to make the latency more predictable, because it's not just about the latency, but really how predictable it is. So there's a lot of different ways where the two worlds are influencing each other, both in the demands and in the solutions that are provided to help enable the deployment.
I like to think of what we're working on now in 802 as beyond 5G. We're working on stuff that's going to be deployed, as I indicated earlier, 3-4 years from now. And it's going to be, as John pointed out, in collaboration with the cellular infrastructure and cellular capabilities. That's one thing I'm very proud of, is that we, operate well in going into the future, anticipating where things are going to be.
It really is our mission statement, right, Paul?
Absolutely.
High quality,
market relevant.
Okay. Do you want to stand for just one more question?
Sure.
Okay. This is related to spectrum. How difficult is it to accommodate ban, pan, and LAN in a spectrum?
Well, we accommodate all three, BAN being body area networks, PAN being personal area networks. What was the last one?
LAN.
LAN, local area networks. They all use different portions of the spectrum. So, the way the technical standards are developed is they're written for a particular portion of the spectrum. And we have specs, technical standards for all three of those.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're out of time, unfortunately. I want to thank everybody who came to our virtual event, and especially Paul and John, and thank you again to our sponsor, Huawei. As noted earlier, the on-demand link for today's event will be emailed to all registrants in approximately 2 hours after we end here. And before you leave, if you could please complete our survey via the survey tool at the bottom of your screen, we would really appreciate it. And so thank you all very much, and have a good day.
And please get involved in 802. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.